What's up? How you doing to all four of my fans? It is I, Kid Migraine, your grumpy guide to all things gaming, attempting to rise from the dead once again to try and continue with this vlog thing in the hopes of one day actually being able to make money off of this and influence people, or at least make people happy, or whatever. I don't know why I do it anymore, other than it's fun. So as you know, this has been on my mind a lot lately for a couple different reasons. One, it's about 5 years old now, 6 years old now. It's definitely had its influence on the industry, both positive and negative. There's a lot of changes happening with this because of some of the books that have come out recently, and a lot of the mentality and the critical role fan thing and a lot of other things. And a lot of groups are now popping up that want to teach people how to play this game, which is interesting and cool. And I like the fact that there are now, even 5-6 years into the life of 5th edition, we're still seeing new groups pop up and new kids going, I want to play. And we know that I have discussed the expectations, sort of the unwritten rules of D&D as opposed to, say, other games. And there are lots of other games out there, and I think it is the responsibility of the people who are making these other games to really, really at this point in time start advertising and start pushing and start letting people know that there are other options. And if there's a story you want to tell, there might be a better system to tell your story in than Dungeons and Dragons. Because for all its advantages and for all its disadvantages, there are certain expectations with Dungeons and Dragons. There are certain unwritten rules and mindsets that need to be considered before you sit down and say, I'm going to run D&D. Which is why Session 0 and Rule 0 are so important. And what do those mean? Well, Rule 0 is basically the DM is always correct. The DM may not always be right, but the DM is always correct. So the DM has final say, or should have final say, in the rules of their game. But it is the responsibility of that DM during Session 0 to make all the players very clear on what those rules are. So there's no misunderstandings 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 games in when a player brings up something that wasn't made clear at the beginning, but the rules say they can do it, and then the DM's like, no, I blah, blah, blah. And the player's like, well, you never said that. I want to be X according to the rules that we agreed on or that you failed to tell us about during Session 0. I don't see why I can't do this because it's in the book. And I pretty much think that if you're running Dungeons and Dragons, everything in this book is 99% expected to be legal in your game. The core classes, I assume, are going to be allowed, and the core races, I assume, are going to be allowed. And if they're not allowed, you need to let your players know very specifically that this is not allowed and why it's not allowed. And if you're not allowing it, why are you not allowing it? And if you're trying to make D&D something it's not, why? And if you're trying to make D&D something it's not, maybe you should consider the fact that there are other systems out there that do the exact same thing D&D does, but differently, or in some cases, better. There are a lot of people who feel that Powered by the Apocalypse Dungeon World does D&D better than D&D, as it's a far more narrative, player, impulse-based system. There are a lot of people out there that think games like Dungeon Crawl Classics and Torchbearer and Lamentations of the Flame Princess really capture that less bogged down, less splat booky, less overcomplicated 2nd edition gonzo feel, especially Dungeon Crawl Classic, better than 3rd edition does, and that there are stories you can tell using those systems that you can't tell using D&D. D&D has like I've said, certain expectations. I expect that if I'm going to sit down and play D&D and hey, I want to run a half-elf sorcerer and maybe multi-class into rogue at some point in time, I'm either told, yes, that's allowed at the very beginning, or I'm told, no, that isn't allowed at the very beginning, and this is why. I don't have elves in my world, or there's no multi-classing in my world, or I'm not allowing feats in my world. Because multi-classing and feats are options, they're not official. Most people assume, I can take a feat, but no, actually, the feats are optional. The DM can say, no feats, or no multi-classing, or because I'm running a human-centric world, there are no elves. There's only humans and half-elves. Or, there's only dwarves. And this is rule 0. This is session 0. This is what I'm wanting. But there also has to be that compromise where the players say, if you've got 5 players who all want to run a Waiaksu, anime-inspired kung fu film, shout out to Trenton Cunningham, where everybody's being able to pull off ridiculous stuff, but still within the rules of D&D, because otherwise it's a different game. And the DM says no. Does he just now lose 5 players? Or does a DM have to compromise on some levels? Now we know D&D has said, let them do whatever they want, which is completely and utterly wrong because there has to be constraints, there has to be rules, there has to be a story. You can't just drop them in a sandbox and say, do whatever you want, because inevitably they say, what am I supposed to do? Or what adventures are there? Or let's go beat up the bartender. So DMs, I'm sorry, this sandbox, no, you got to have some kind of plot. It could be a very vague plot, but you got to have some kind of plot. And you got to let players know. Because if I ask a question, I don't want the answer to be, fuck you, you're frustrating me, Mike. You don't know what you're talking about. I made it very clear at the beginning. No, you didn't. Because if you made it clear at the very beginning, I wouldn't be asking the question. Players would not be asking you questions. And players want to know what they can get away with. They want that freedom to tell the story in their mind. And for better or worse, that is even more so now than ever before because of Critical Role. And because of the YouTube, and because of the stuff that people like Joe and TJ and Deborah and Satine are doing, and the whole idea of player advocacy and player narrative, the idea that I can tell whatever story I want to tell in D&D and you have to let me tell it because that's what I saw other people do, is very prevalent and very forefront in the mind of players. And as a DM, we have to say, this is the story we're going to tell together. This is where I'm willing to compromise. This is where you have to be willing to compromise. But these are the core 0 rules that will not change. And those have to be clearly defined, clearly written, clearly understandable, so that 15 sessions into a game, a player or, some new player who comes who's never played in your game before and says, I want to be a Warforged artifactor, understands there are no Warforged artifacts in this game, and this is why. And in such a way so they don't feel like you're telling them to fuck off. You should work with them until they say, okay, I understand what you want to make. Let's find a happy medium between your idea and what I'm allowing in the world. There might not be Warforged, but there might be golems or homunculuses or something else, some happy medium. Or maybe you can't start out as a Warforged, but maybe through role-playing, if we know now that that's your goal, we can create something together within the rules of my world that allow you to become something similar to a Warforged artifactor. But right now you can't start as a Warforged artifactor. There has to be that compromise within the constraints of the rules. If you don't tell people things, they don't know it. And a lot of humans have the assumption that, okay, you know it because whatever. But if you don't tell me how to do something, I don't know how to do it. So I'm going to try and do it based upon what knowledge and skills are available to me. Like, I don't know how to fly a plane. I don't know what to do if everybody on the plane is unconscious except for me. And if there's nobody telling me how to do it, then I'm just going to try and fly the plane based upon my current skill set and what I've seen on TV, which means that plane is probably crashing. That's a ridiculous example, but it's also a funny example, and you get the point. I hope you get the point. I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't understand the words coming out of my mouth. Half the time, I don't understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. But what I'm trying to get across is to prevent this between players and GMs and players, because our culture of gaming has changed so dramatically since 5th edition came out. And just in the last few months, it's changed dramatically, and it's going to continue to change dramatically, and old curmudgeons like me have to be willing to bend with the raw waters, understand the mindset of players now and how the game has changed, and say, okay, if I'm running D&D, then I'm running D&D, and there are certain things that I have to understand are expected if I'm running D&D. And if I'm not going to allow Warforged Artifactors or Half-Elf Sorcerers or Dragonborn, I need to let the players know very early and very concretely why, and I need to be willing to compromise with the players to help them find a happy medium between my session 0 and their expectations. Or I need to find a system that tells the story I want to tell better than D&D does, like Fantasy Age, or Blades in the Dark, or Dungeon Crawl Classics, or Dungeon World, or Tales from the Loop. I mean, let's face it, fuckers, there's a reason why 5th edition hasn't won any awards since it came out. Sure, it's sold the most, it's the most influential, it's the one that's most in your face, but as far as the industry is concerned, games like Tales from the Loop are what wins awards. Games like Swinehinder is what wins awards. Games like Blue Planet are what's capturing the imagination of the people that matter. And while D&D is always going to be the bread and butter of our hobby, there are lots and lots of games out there that are as good and or better than D&D that might be a better tool for people to tell their stories in. Like, I know that if I'm running D&D, I'm going to run D&D, and I'm going to run D&D pretty much as it's written, even though I don't enjoy it, but I have that understanding that the expectation of the people sitting at my table is pretty much a Dungeons and Dragons game. I'm not going to try and make Dungeons and Dragons into Battletech. I'm going to say, as I've said repeatedly, if it's in the player's handbook, it's 100% legal. I won't argue with you at all. You can even have the lucky feat because it's in the player's handbook. If it's not in the player's handbook, but it's from an official source like Xanther's Guide to Everything or this new Guide to the Wild Mount, please at least photocopy the page it's on so I have a copy of the new thing you're bringing into my game. And if it fits basic D&D, if it doesn't break the game, if it's not something that's very specific to a one specific world, like Warforged Artifactors pretty much only exist on Eberron, and you're not going to find them in any other game. I'm sorry. It's, you know, if this is fantasy, medieval, Dark Ages, there's no Warforged Artifactors. There's no Warforged Artifactors in this. The Warforged Artifactors are in Eberron. So if I was running Eberron, or an Eberron-style game, then I'd say, sure, you can be a robot. But since I'm not, I'm running this, then yeah, I'm probably not going to allow that. But if there's other stuff that doesn't break the story I'm telling and doesn't break out of the expectations of normal D&D, and you can show me a copy of it, then yeah, I'll probably allow it. Because that's your expectation. Otherwise, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not running D&D. That guy over there is running D&D. He's a really good DM. If you want to play D&D, you should probably go over to his table because I'm running Star Wars, or I'm running Tales from the Loop, or I'm running Aftermath, or I'm running Villains and Vigilantes, and that is a different rule set. Or if I'm running fantasy, but I'm using Dungeon World, or Dungeon Crawl Classics, or Tales, or Blades in the Dark, or Torchbearer, or 100 other systems that I consider as good or better than D&D, that are tools that I can use if I want to tell a different story than D&D. And I really have no idea what my point is, so I should probably shut the fuck up now. All right, I'll talk to you later, losers. Hopefully I will be feeling better. There are plans for the summer. As you know, the video vending machine food fest is still going to happen. Just has to be the right time and the right health. The going out and doing more outside things are also going to happen. Again, based upon my health. I'm still hoping to hit 200 subs by August 4th. So who knows? But above all, my goal still remains to try and entertain, educate, have some fun, do something that I'm still passionate about, say things that I'm still passionate about, even if the things I say piss people the fuck off, because somebody has to be saying the shit that goes against the general homogenous, oh, we're all going to get along and everything we do is okay. You know, I don't know. But, you know, no, I'm the guy who's actually going to read the book, and I'm the guy who's going to actually say bullshit, even if the bullshit is bullshit, and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But that's what you should expect from me by now. Talk to you later, losers.